Mute.
Well, this is Dr. Richard Barwell back again with the BrainTrust for Neurologically Based Chiropractic, and I'm excited about this one. We just got finished with his partner, and I am just chomping at the bit to get talking to Dr. Dennis Perman, co-owner of the Master Circle group that we work with very closely. We've had a great history together, and Dennis and I have a lot of fun together. And I'm Dennis, thank you for your time. I know
you're very welcome.
Guy.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's talk about your background. Where did you graduate from? How long were you in practice? Tell me the story of you.
You want to talk about prehistoric times? Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you and I were looking at the dinosaurs, but that's
yeah. Well, you know what? I woke up this morning. I looked down. I saw the ground. I knew it was going to be a great day because I'm not looking up at it.
Yeah.
I graduated from New York Chiropractic College in 1977. That means I've been a chiropractor for over 40 years, more than a third of the history of the profession, I might add. And I fell in love with chiropractic from the very beginning. The whole idea of innate intelligence, the whole concept of the nerve system, the brain running things made perfect sense to me. So my history is not remarkable in that regard. I came in at 21 years old knowing absolutely nothing. I graduated with the flame of life in my pisiforms. And from there, I practiced for 10 glorious years. I loved being a practitioner, but I felt a higher calling to be able to see if I could influence doctors at the highest level. And I went into teaching and coaching from there. Last 30 years, I've spent basically on the phone, talking to chiropractors about how they can build great practices and great lives.
I think you've had some experience in coaching and working outside the profession as well with somebody that is somewhat known out there.
Oh, yeah. You want me to mention Tony Robbins. I worked with Tony for 12 years as a master trainer, one of his instructors who trained his trainers. And it was an invaluable experience. I was in the right place at the right time. So I learned a lot about personal power. I learned a lot about communication and persuasion. I learned a lot about people skills, developing rapport, and being able to influence people at the highest level. I learned a lot about leadership. So these skill sets translated nicely to being able to guide chiropractors to higher achievement, because it's tough enough being successful in a field that everyone already understands. You know, when you go to the store and buy something, you're going there for a product that you already know what it is. Most people go into a chiropractic office and they don't really know what they're going there for. Most of the time, it's some permutation or combination of I need to feel differently. Now, while that often does happen, in fact, it's a good thing it does because we'd be lonely if it didn't, we know that chiropractic is about so much more than just feeling better. The shift that, you or one of your people coined the phrase, moving from pain to brain. And this is indeed the movement that our profession needs to make. We need to find a way to be able to discuss people's health and health care in terms not only of their symptoms, but actually what's going on in their body at any given time.
That shift was made by an 80-year-old chiropractor who'd been in practice for years and years and years. And he, that was exciting for someone in that background to catch on to what we were doing and come up with that phrase. And we said, can we use it? And he said, yes. And we heard from him about, I think a year and a half ago, and he had to quit practice. He couldn't maintain it anymore. And he was literally in tears because he had to quit practice. I mean, that's the dedication that we're missing today.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's just not there. There was a shift that happened to you from practice to going into coaching. What was the deciding factor to give up practice and then go into coaching?
Well, it's very personal, actually, but I don't mind sharing it. I guess it's a little bit of a a strong desire on my part to do as much good as I possibly could. All the time I was growing up, I know it sounds really corny, but I had a sense that I was supposed to be doing something really important, and I didn't know what it was.
I get it.
So when I got involved with chiropractic, I realized that there was a lot of opportunity there just to help people get well, and I loved that. Believe me, I loved being a chiropractor. I didn't move away from chiropractic practice. I moved toward having chiropractors as my practice. See, instead of seeing a few hundred people a week, I could work with a few hundred chiropractors who then go out and see a few hundred people a week, and therefore increase my impact by a few hundred. So that was what lured me into this. But if it weren't for a depth of understanding of the chiropractic principle, then I never would have had either the courage or the intestinal fortitude to carry this off.
Now, we both graduated with the concept of the vertebral subluxation and the structural model and the bone on nerve. I mean, I practiced with that for years. You know, when Renaissance came along, I bought all the tapes and I did all the education, and I had to, you know, pinch the finger in the spine.
Me too.
A big practice built based on that. That was never a problem. But then the shift came along because I was involved in doing some of the basic research that started all this darn thing. And in my mind, I went like, holy smokes. But I was in the middle of doing this. This is one of the challenges that I know that I face. And I know because the Master Circle is now one of the leading coaching. Matter of fact, it's the only coaching group I know out there that's teaching neurologically based coaching for chiropractors.
Yes.
They have a problem shifting from that structural model to realizing that there's a bigger picture involved in this. How did you deal with that?
Okay, you warned me that you were going to ask me this, and you also said don't get too involved in some of the personal history that led to it. I have to at least make some reference to it. When we met, I was afraid that you were too radical, that you were somehow diminishing or disassociating from subluxation. And it turned out that nothing could be further from the truth. It's just a deeper understanding that subluxation is actually an effect, not a cause. And the shift is not so much the hard bone on soft nerve stuff as it is in recognizing that subluxation happens in response to brain stress. So this is the shift that chiropractors need to make in order to help them understand why it's so important for them to get their word out to so many people. See, Richard, the hypnosis that we've been buying into comes from looking at the spine, looking at the intervertebral foramen where the nerve comes out of the spine from the outside in. When we look from the outside in, well, essentially we're lured into discussing radiculopathies and nerve interference and spinal pain. And unfortunately, even though that stuff is all true, it's a secondary representation of the chiropractic truth. If you look at the IVF from the inside out, now you look up, you see this glorious brain. You look to your side and you see this magnificent spinal cord. And you look out through the hole, and the spinal nerve root is important, but now it's in the context of everything that happens in the nerve system. So instead of being seduced by what happens at the intervertebral foramen, you recognize that that is actually a circuit breaker. That's a shift that happens in response to the brain not functioning properly. Now, fortunately, that feedback loop works in reverse as well. And when you trigger a response by introducing a concussion of forces into the spine, innate intelligence can use that concussion of forces. The thought that we're taking a bone and putting it where it belongs is absurd. How would we know where it belongs? Innate intelligence knows where it belongs. So we introduce a concussion of forces, which then the brain uses as it should, and fortunately, the wise chiropractor stays out of the way while that's happening. So this shift manifested of me stopping focusing so much on the spinal nerve root and being lured into talking about pain, and rather seeing it as part of a continuum, part of a system where the brain is the supreme aspect of it. Innate intelligence works through the brain, and that way the person heals. The subluxation is still critically important, but if we recognize it as an effect rather than a cause, now we start to understand the way chiropractic was really intended to function.
Boy, well said. Thank you. I get such resistance about the concept of what I call moving chiropractic upstairs. It's amazing. Well said. And it seems to me that there's been some guy in the history of chiropractic that said that. I think his name was BJ.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. The simple safety pin cycle is perhaps the most profound of all the chiropractic models, and it's hardly even taught in school anymore, and I just for the life of me can't understand why. It's brain cell to tissue cell and back, or tissue cell to brain cell and back. Without the brain being central in that formula, you have nothing.
Yeah.
So
it's the interface between exterior and interior. It's the controller.
So the resistance that you're talking about, Richard, I think is more from an apprehension that there's going to be something taken away. This is one of the things that I resisted when we first met, that I was afraid somebody was going to take subluxation away from me. But that's not the point. The point is just understanding it in the context of a functional neurological system. So you don't have to sacrifice anything about subluxation except recognizing what role it actually plays instead of the role that we've been duped into thinking it plays.
Yeah, and it still keeps that spinal area as our primary area of awareness because of the incredible impact we have on the nervous system and the sensory nervous system to put change into that structure, or that neurological structure that's governing everything. So
well, I saw a remarkable quote from Roger Sperry, who won the Nobel Prize in brain research in 1981. And Sperry said that 90% of the stimulation and nutrition to the brain is manifested as a result of spinal movement. Now, that's not an advertisement for keeping your spine healthy. I don't know what is. And this is something that Nobel Prize winners know, aficionados in neurology know, but the average person, and in fact, even the average chiropractor, is not near as connected with this concept. So what we need to do, I think, more than anything else, is just whack the profession upside the head so that they remember where we actually came from. Like, what are we actually doing here? It's brain cell to tissue cell. We've got to make sure that the brain is functioning properly. And this is why a course in brain-based wellness is so relevant now for practicing chiropractors. If you don't find a way to understand and then convey that the stresses that your patient is experiencing are actually the cause of their problem, and that the subluxation is the body's defense mechanism, it's a perfect response. As Dr. Morter said, everything that happens in the body is a perfect response that's dictated by innate intelligence. But when we misinterpret that, then we can get waylaid. The key is, if we can figure out how to diminish people's physical, chemical, emotional, and even vibrational stress, whether it's to eliminate the stresses if we can, or to get the individual to be able to adapt better and be able to handle the stresses, that's what's going to diminish the likelihood of subluxation. That's what's going to cause the person to experience better brain function, and ultimately the manifestation of that is better health and wellness. So that's what we're really aiming for.
So taking a look at the profession today, and there's been a big change since you and I graduated in the profession and the direction that it's headed. What's your sort of view of the future of the profession if it doesn't move towards neurologically based?
Okay, so I tend to be very optimistic in general, and I'm very optimistic about what I expect to happen in the profession. The universal truth that healthy brain function is required for good health and wellness is already being well accepted, not only by chiropractors, but in general. If you watch TV and you see Deepak Chopra or Daniel Amen or David Perlmutter talking about brain function, I mean, if you look at the right part of those presentations, it almost sounds like something a chiropractor is saying. So my optimistic outlook on the profession is, I feel there's never been a better time to be a chiropractor. I feel like there's never been more opportunity for chiropractors to learn what they need to know to perform miracles in their offices. I feel like the walls that have previously existed around straights and mixers are slowly but surely being dismantled so that we can use a variety of different interventions to be able to assure the patient of great brain function. This is what we really were intended to do in the first place, was to make sure that the person's nerve system was functioning properly. In the very beginning, they talked about it all the time. And that's one of the reasons there was so much passion, because it made sense. When we got seduced by the intervertebral foramen and the nerve root, we lost our way a bit. Now, the shame of it is that it works incredibly well. If you're a pain-based chiropractor, you get amazing results. And you may push back on me and say, no, I'm actually doing a lot of good. And you are. I don't mean in any way to suggest otherwise. The real question is why? It's why are you doing good? Is it because you're taking the foot off the garden hose so that there can be flow in the nerve? Or is it because you're rebalancing the function of the nerve system using the spine as an intervention point? Either way, as long as you adjust the spine, you're going to get miraculous results.
Yeah.
But helping people to understand what the root cause of this is creates a transformational experience both in the chiropractor and in all the patients that come to see that chiropractor. And that's the reason why we're so passionate about brain-based wellness, because it creates a transformational shift in people, even more so than just the miraculous response to a proper adjustment.
Now, since you've changed your sort of direction and coaching from that structural model to the neurological model in there. What's been your experience with your clients on this?
First, a sense of ease and relief, because it's very difficult to deal with painful issues all day, every day, and that's all you do. It drains us. We tend to be very empathic people. And I know when I had a day where I was going to see 50, 60, 70 sick people, at the end of that day, I felt like I needed a scrubbing. I mean, I was exhausted. Now, as I started to learn more about the brain, and remember, I only practiced for 10 years. I retired in 1987. So a lot of the incredibly cool stuff that we talk about now didn't even exist back then. My movement towards coaching was not based on wanting to be a brain-based coach. It evolved as I started to see what the typical roadblocks were in most chiropractors' practices, and moving towards a practice where you talk about physical, chemical, emotional, and vibrational stress. Instead of talking about pain all day, it's uplifting, because you may or may not be able to solve the riddle of somebody's pain. Often you can, but you can invariably improve the process by which they adapt to their stresses. So it's fruitful. It's productive. Almost right from the beginning, the patient is speaking your language. And instead of asking them to buy into a technical jargon that is way over their heads, and most of the time, even the best patients find it incomprehensible, instead, we're using simple language: brain, stress. It's just so much easier for people to wrap their minds around. So the big shift for me, and what I notice in most of the doctors that I work with, is that there's a fluency. There's an ease of operation that really wasn't there when we were concentrating primarily on traditional chiropractic terminology.
One of the things I note that when you change the intent of your care, you change the outcome. And so when the intent of care was to get rid of pain, we know what happened. We were pretty good at doing that. You got rid of the pain, you also got rid of the patient.
Yes.
But when you change the intent now to improving neurological function, when does that end?
Exactly. Well, and it ends when there's no more gravitational field tugging our structure downward. It ends when there's no more pollution in the environment that's toxifying our air, our water, and our food. It ends when we either aren't married or aren't working or aren't sick or aren't broke or are. There's never going to be a time when there will be no stress. Now, there may be a time when we can moderate our stress by refining our lifestyles, but you're not moderating gravity, and you're not changing pollution. And the chances are, if you ever watch the news one day for the rest of your life, you're going to experience emotional and mental stress. So it just makes more sense. You know what? I brush my teeth every day. I take a shower every day. I mean, I'm not looking for applause, but it's like I eat good food every single day. There's habits that I develop in order to be sure that I'm going to experience the very best life has to offer. Now, integrating a chiropractic adjustment into that routine is not a heavy lift. Look, I'm very particular. I have a particular chiropractor I want to go to. I drive an hour each way once a week in order to go see this guy, Dr. Jared Leon in Stony Brook, New York. He's a wizard, but that's not the point. The point is, I am dedicated to keeping my mind and body working properly. I'm 64 years old. I feel like I'm about halfway. And the fact is, if I don't take meticulous care of myself, I have no reason to expect to be able to do all the things I have left to do. Now, to varying degrees, your patients will feel that. And that means that part of your responsibility is not just to eradicate their pain, but rather to give them a new outlook on life, where they recognize that they can invest in themselves in a different way perhaps than they ever dreamed possible. When you invest in keeping your brain healthy by getting chiropractic care, by eating properly, by breathing effectively, by moving effectively, by thinking effectively, what happens as a result of this is everything that's dependent on your brain gets better. And almost everything in your body is dependent on your brain. So if you get your brain tuned up to peak efficiency, then you have a right to expect your body to work well. Okay. I mean, I've never been in a hospital. I only had to take drugs once in my life. And some of it's luck of the draw. I get that. I'm not bragging. I'm just reflecting that I make the investment in keeping myself healthy the way that I want my doctors to cause their patients to accept those responsibilities. And when they do, then chiropractic rises to the place that it really was intended to be in the first place. Not as spinal mechanics, but rather as leaders in transformational health and wellness that cause people to experience the very best that life has to offer.
Now, you know that we have the Neuro Infinity, which measures the neurological responses. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. You've got to, and chiropractors have always been very bad about this one aspect. We had x-rays. We took x-rays to begin with. What percentage of the profession did post x-rays? Very, very few. So there was no, it's just by guess and by gosh.
Yes.
And I think a lot of the people are afraid to do a neurological measurement to begin with, and then do one at the end. And my response to them is, listen, what percentage of your people get better? They say, about 90%. Well, the only reason they get better is because you change neurological function.
Yes.
That's why chiropractic works.
Yes.
So the reward of being able to look at it. What's your take on the ability to measure pre and post?
Yeah, well, to me, because I still come from a scientific background. I mean, I'm a weird, goofy guy, but I went to Johns Hopkins University and studied biochemistry there. So I have a science background, and my mind works like a scientist's mind does, even though I'm an artist as well. So for me, using the Neuro Infinity to measure brain function is invaluable. It's essential, because otherwise, it's like, it's the difference between somebody intuitively going to somebody's spine and through some mystical process figuring out what to do, or somebody doing a physical clinical workup, a chiropractic workup, where you actually do understand the biomechanics of what's going on and what you need to do to intervene properly. I'm not saying it can't be done by intuition. Of course it can be. But man, it's like having one hand tied behind your back. If you have a Neuro Infinity, you can actually understand what the person's brain patterns are. Are they over-aroused or under-aroused? Do they need an intervention that's very strong, or do they need a gradual small intervention that happens over time? See, your research on frequency, duration, and intensity is invaluable. And most people don't know about it. And the reason they don't know about it is because most folks, even though they may have practiced for many years, the joke is, have you been in practice for 30 years, or have you been in practice 1 year, 30 years in a row? A lot of people are doing the same kind of stuff that they did when they graduated because it worked then, and to some degree it still works now. But man, if you've got a cell phone in your pocket, you understand that it isn't it isn't now what it was then. There's many opportunities to be able to let science lead you to a much better place. And tools like the Neuro Infinity, where you actually get to ascertain what is really going on in this person's brain. The moment that you can ask that question, you can get an answer for it. And if you don't have a Neuro Infinity, you can't even ask the question. Now we talk a lot about being locked in sympathetic stress. A healthy person is able to access both sympathetic and parasympathetic function when it is appropriate. The majority of sick people, by your measure, 80 or 90%, are over-aroused. They're locked in sympathetic stress. One of the things the adjustment does that almost nothing else does is it gives the patient an opportunity to rebalance their parasympathetic system. This is why techniques like upper cervical technique and Logan and SOT, where you go, well, how could that be? You're not really adjusting the spine. You're all the way at one end. Well, yeah, because that's where you influence the parasympathetic nerve system. Now, I'm far from a functional neurologist. My last 30 years have been involved in psychology and business and helping doctors grow. But it doesn't take a functional neurologist to understand that there's got to be balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic function. That's what it was designed to do. If you always feel like the tiger is chasing you, you never have a chance to rest. You never have a chance to heal. So what chiropractic care does, and all the different brain-based wellness modalities are designed to do, is to create that balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic function so that the person can have a healing and recovery experience. And this is, when you talk about people being over-aroused, well, too often what happens is doctors in their enthusiasm want to keep on putting more and more energy into that patient's spine. And the problem is if they're already over-aroused, then it's too much energy. they're still in sympathetic stress, and then they have to defend against your adjustment, for goodness sake. So somebody like me, who I was a every day, every other day kind of chiropractor, I mean, I want people in my office. But what I've learned is that chiropractors can do more things for people than just only the thrust into the spine. You can use brain tap. You can use frequency-specific microcurrent. You can do a nutritional workup. You can help the person you can use pulsed electromagnetism. There's so many different things you can do. Loomis's enzymes. There's so many different things that you can do that facilitate better brain function. We don't have to feel imprisoned that all we are is bone movers. We can truly become the doctors of the brain, the healers of the brain. Nobody else is better equipped to do that than the chiropractor, which gets back to the reason why I'm so optimistic about our future. Because we are ahead of everybody in this particular realm, except for a few super high-level neurologists, and basically they're research people. They're not doing anything with patients. It's up to the chiropractic profession to seize control of the care and feeding of the brain. We are the experts on it, and we're the ones who have to get it done.
This is exciting stuff. Now, this is the quality of coaching that you get with the Master Circle, and this is why I work with these guys. I love them to death. I love what they're doing. I love your message. And your intent with this is just, it's incredible. And I want to thank you for having the courage to stand up and change the direction and work on the profession and changing I mean, because it's not easy. We're still getting people out there in the profession that think that what we're doing is wrong because they don't even listen to what we're saying. So I want to thank you for your contribution to chiropractic over the years, my friend. We're better off because of you, and better off because of Bob's work that you do together. So Mr. Author, musician, chiropractor extraordinaire, coach fantastic, I want to thank you for your time today. And I want to recommend that anybody is listening, if you want to find out about the Master Circle and coaching, especially with the new direction for the profession, you can get in touch with the Master Circle. And Bob gave the phone number. You want to give your phone number?
Yes, the phone number is 800-451-4514. The website is themastercircle.com. We have a free podcast every week. I offer a free column every week. And before I sign off, Richard, there's one last thing I feel I need to say. Neurologically based chiropractic is clearly the way of the future. If it wasn't for your inspiration and your determination, especially with thick-headed guys like myself, then there's no way that this would be moving ahead at the pace or with the passion that it is. So you say nice things about me, but clearly many of the things that are working beautifully in our work would not even have manifested if it wasn't for you and the work with the Neuro Infinity and your dedication to neurologically based chiropractic. So we're in this together, old friend, and we've got to do whatever it takes to wake the profession up, help them see what they need to know in order to be able to create exactly what they need to create the practices and the lifestyles of their dreams. And I think we know how to do that. Let's see if we can help as many chiropractors as possible.
Super. Now, I know that we will meet again on a stage somewhere down the road.
No doubt.
Thank you.
Thank you.